Hey guys, Jay here. When I look back at my time playing video games, so many wonderful memories come from my time handheld gaming. Whether it was time spent futzing around with so bad they're good Tiger LCD games, to running out of batteries when I was playing Tetris on my original Game Boy, to my everyday carry 3DS, handheld gaming and I are intertwined. And while the 3DS might be my all-time favorite dedicated portable system, this guy right here, the Game Boy Advance, is not far behind. Before we talk about some games, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below to stay up to date with what we're up to. Now, let's take a look at 10 of my absolute favorite must-play games for the Game Boy Advance.
All right, well, straight up, they're not all going to be easy to afford. Some of these are hidden gems for a reason. But Astro Boy: The Omega Factor was spectacular. It was developed by Treasure and Hitmaker, released in 2004. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up, and it doubles down on the source material. You've got all the wonderfulness of the Astro Boy license, but why not bring in all the references from creator Osamu Tezuka's entire series of work? There's a lot happening in this game. From the big, bold sprite work on Astro Boy himself, the normal-sized enemies, boss battles, giant versions of the regular enemies, and combat special effects, the game is a visual masterpiece. On top of that, you have well-balanced combat and crazy powers and abilities. But most importantly is the ability to customize Astro. When you meet NPCs in the game, you're allowed to increase his stats, allowing for easier play and access to secret areas of the game. Not to be overlooked also is the music in the game. Nothing misses here. Everything works. It's truly worth it on the cost of this game. If you've ever played River City Ransom for the NES, then you know how wonderful this series is. EX is a remake of the classic original, with new sprites and a new color palette, as well as some changes to the gameplay. Most notably, it's not a co-op game anymore. And while that is lost, instead you actually have an AI partner which helps you fight the various street gangs in each area. One of the neat changes made in this version is the ability to fine-tune the game on the fly, which allows you to make for easier or more difficult gameplay, as well as some other settings that you can adjust. And all the bits you'd expect are here. You get to go to shopping malls to heal up and learn new fighting techniques. There's street gangs full of guys named Trevor, and copious weapons to beat the hell out of the bad guys with. And not to be overlooked, of course, is just the amount of enemies that you fight. There's so many everywhere. And the best part, when you defeat them, someone is going to shout, "Barf." Now, while I'm not a huge fan of the source material anime, I do maintain that Yu-Gi-Oh! As a trading card game is one of the best that's ever made. Now, no, it's not Magic or Pokemon or anything like that, but it's a solid third place, and the game plays really well. Dungeon Dice Monsters was a spin-off of that trading card game and was played with, you guessed it, dice. Each die had a different symbol on each face in place of the more traditional pips, with each symbol representing a different action you could take or bank for your action pool. The tabletop game itself was a bit clunky, but the video game version streamlined a lot and made it a ton of fun to play. You get to choose 15 different dice, which represent creatures or abilities, and you can use them to create an action pool. You lay down a track to connect your creatures to your opponents, attack, or simply move your monster. All the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Creatures and monsters are here, as well as trap cards and everything like that. Truth be told, you can't really go wrong with any Yu-Gi-Oh! Game for the Game Boy Advance. This one just happens to be my favorite because it's a little bit different than just a card fighter. I can't have a video about a Nintendo handheld and not mention Wario at least once, where the greedy Mario clone has made the greatest impact in his solo games. Wario Land 4 is a platformer where you go through a series of levels collecting treasure, of course, because, you know, it's Wario, all while trying to defeat the Golden Diva. Your basic platformer actions are here: jump, toss, charge, ground pound, and there's some fun transformations in play as well, such as turning into a zombie. I also really dig the grab the key and run mechanic of completing the levels, where Wario will have 1 minute to get from where he's at to the exit. It feels very much like the Escape board game if you've ever played that. The game is gorgeous. Graphics are great, the sound is great, and there's a lot of really trippy cutscenes as Wario falls into spiraling pits. I feel like a lot of times the Wario games get overlooked in the grand scheme of things as far as good platformers go, but you're not going to be disappointed with Wario Land 4. It's a lot of fun to play. Now, Wario might want you to have a rotten day, but you will not if you play Wario Land 4. Okay, now straight up, you can't go wrong with any Mega Man Battle Network title. 3 Blue just happens to be my favorite because it's the one I played first. The Battle Network series is a series of strategic battle games, where your digital avatar Mega Man uses different cards to battle enemies in the game. I didn't know quite what to make of it when I first played it, but the deeper into the game I got and the further along I moved, I fell more and more in love with the gameplay. Strategic use of the cards is paramount to your success. If you match types, you're allowed to use more cards in the battle, as well as if you match symbols for the same result. It makes for some truly exciting battles. You also actively move around the battlefield, and you can claim areas of the battlefield to prevent your enemies from encroaching or forcing them into a pinch so you can make a strong attack against them all simultaneously. It's a really interesting, think-on-the-fly brand of strategic gameplay, which is sorely lacking from other strategy games. Again, this is, makes full use of the Game Boy Advance and looks great, plays great, and sounds great. And all your favorite Mega Man characters are here. Gutsman plays a big part in the game, as he's one of your friend's avatar. Really, really love Mega Man Battle Network. Puzzle platformers really saw a renaissance on the Game Boy Advance, and Mario vs. Donkey Kong is one of my favorite examples of that genre. You play as Mario, and you're after Donkey Kong, as the title would imply. But along the way, you also have to battle Shy Guys, Bob-ombs, and Piranha Plants, all while flipping switches and finding keys to advance in the level, all to track down the wind-up toys that Donkey Kong stole. It's one of my favorite aspects of this game. It's just the ridiculous concept of it is Donkey Kong wanted to steal Mario toys. Another thing I really like about it is that it incorporates classic Mario gameplay while not feeling forced. You can run and jump, and sure, you can pick things up to toss them at the bad guys. There's nothing quite as satisfying as whacking a Shy Guy with a trash can. But frequently that's a red herring to move through the level. Sometimes you need to use those enemies to reach keys or other collectibles in the various levels. I also really dig the mid-level mini-games to get extra lives. It's so simple, rather than just doing like the slot machine or anything like that. In my early teens, I was a Sega fanboy. I had a Genesis before I got an SNES. I actually didn't get an SNES until very late in the life cycle of that platform. And Sonic was my thing. But eventually I got to the point where I just wasn't enjoying the games anymore. Now, while I didn't love the 3D Sonic titles, the Game Boy Advance titles, Sonic Advance and Sonic Advance 2, were magnificent. And if you had told 12-year-old Jay that the best-looking 2D Sonic game ever would be on a handheld Nintendo console, I'd have thought you were crazy. But here we are. The game is classic Sonic. It's fast, loud, bombastic, and fun. Animations are top-notch. Sonic winds up for big runs now instead of just dropping into the animation frame. And simple things like starting from their running blocks at the beginning of a level are such a small but significant touch that it adds a ton of character to the game. There's a lot of unlockable characters as well. You can get Tails, Knuckles, and Cream, and each stage sequence wraps up with a glorious Dr. Robotnik boss battle. If it's been a while since you played a Sonic game, Sonic Advance 2 is worth your time. Much like Mega Man Battle Network, you can't go wrong with Advance Wars or its sequel, Advance Wars 2. I just personally prefer Advance Wars 2 because there's a lot of small improvements to the gameplay and some quality of life improvements as well. But either one truly is a great game. If you're not familiar, Advance Wars is kind of Fire Emblem's cousin. It's a modern take on a turn-based strategy game involving troop deployment. You move your characters around the map, capturing bases and towns and attacking enemy forces. At its core, it's an incredibly simple concept, but as you get deeper into the game, every decision you make, from positioning to troop deployment or to using your commanding officer's special power, can greatly impact your chance for success. Now, Fire Emblem rightfully gets the top spot for Nintendo strategy games because it is a marvelous series. Personally, I think there's room for both, but unfortunately, Nintendo doesn't see it that way. Sadly, the Advance Wars series has died off. Nintendo is making Fire Emblem games instead of Advance Wars games. I really wish they would bring them back. But in lieu of that, you can't go wrong with either of the Game Boy Advance or DS games. Alien Hominid is one of the single most difficult platform shooters I've ever played on the GameCube, and it was also made for the Game Boy Advance, and it's just as difficult and just as fun. Yeah, it might not be as flashy as its GameCube or Xbox Live Arcade HD counterpart, but the gameplay is 100% solid. Alien Hominid has a ton of power-ups to collect and use, as well as vehicles you can pilot. Everything from a tank, to a Yeti, to a UFO. The signature humor from anything that the behemoth publishes is firmly entrenched, with lots of small humorous nudges appearing in the backgrounds of stages, as well as absolutely ridiculous dismemberments that happen to the men in black when they're killed. It's loud, it's big, it's a ton of fun, and it will keep you coming back because you're not going to beat it your first time through. But the beauty of the game is that it's designed as such that you don't want to just throw the controller when you lose a level. You want to keep going. You want to beat the men in black. You want to win. Alien Hominid is a ton of fun. Last but not least, anytime you can get two beautifully reimagined RPG classics on one cart is a huge win. Final Fantasy I and II Dawn of Souls features both the original Final Fantasy and its NES sequel, Final Fantasy II. Each one remade with beautiful sprites and music, each lovingly updated to be more enjoyable for modern audiences. But one of my favorite aspects of this game is the bestiary. Your save files for each game actually allows you to open the bestiary for that title and view information about the enemies and monsters you've battled and defeated. It's a simple addition, but it adds a completionist aspect to the game I didn't think I would enjoy as much as I did. It's almost a Final Fantasy Pokemon game. Each game is as you remember them, just with a fresh coat of paint. You're still fighting Garland in the Chaos Temple, you still have to go fight the Pirate City and win in Final Fantasy 1, and you're still searching for Leon in Final Fantasy 2. But there's hours and hours of fun to be had here. And it shows the ability and talents of everyone at Square that they were able to develop a game, and it still feels modern and relevant 30 years after release, just with an updated coat of paint. Dawn of Souls is worth picking up if you're an RPG fan or a Final Fantasy completionist.
10 games, 10 quality experiences, each of them offering something different, and each of them showcasing both the power of the Game Boy Advance and the incredible talent of the developers. There's so much good stuff on the GBA, and this is just a drop in the bucket. We're going to be doing more of these down the road. We're going to take a look at more games on the GBA, stuff on the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, the Game Gear, the Neo Geo Pocket and the WonderSwan Color, and of course, the DS family of systems. On the DS alone, there are literally hundreds of wonderful games and positive experiences you can have with that system. But now I want to hear from you. What is your favorite Game Boy Advance game? Maybe we'll feature it in another one of these videos down the road. Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a thumbs up and hit the subscription button and ring the notification bell to keep up to date with what we've got coming up. The channel has been blowing up lately, guys. We have jumped up like double the number of subscriptions in the last month, and that's such an awesome feeling. I really appreciate the support, and I really appreciate you guys enjoying what we're doing. Until next time, guys, I've been Jay, and you stay square.